They raised their glasses, crystal lights flashing, and my daughter stood in the center, loudly calling me the man who made her mother die in shame. 180 people applauded. The groom's side laughed like a knife. I sat at table 14 in a $200 suit. A man pushed out of his own daughter's life by the entire ballroom. They did not know I was holding a secret. An old iPhone with a recording her mother left. The final instruction: if our daughter uses my death to humiliate you, show her the truth. Before I tell it all, please hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and comment where you're listening from. Thank you for being here. They say a wedding is a reunion, a time for family to come close. But for me, that night, beneath the glittering crystal ceiling of the Four Seasons Houston, was when I understood most clearly what it is to be pushed to the edge by one's own blood. Gentle music flowed from the violins, and guests in gleaming gowns and tuxedos raised their glasses. Bottles of Dom Perignon were opened in succession, foam spilling into crystal flutes, costing hundreds of dollars each. At the center of the hall, Vanessa, my daughter, shone in a pure white Vera Wang dress, worth more than $10,000, a queen amid her court. Beside her stood Christopher Sterling, the polished groom, and the entire Sterling banking clan. And me? I sat at table 14, far at the back, near the service door. The clatter of steel trays and the rush of waiters nearly drowned out the music. On my table sat a glass of water and a few cold canapes, while the head table overflowed with towering white orchids and Bordeaux wine. I had thought I was ready, that the distance between me and Vanessa was only a crack. But when the MC called the couple to the stage, and when Christopher took the microphone, I knew that crack had become a chasm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Christopher began, warm-voiced and sure, "today is a great day not only for us, but for both families. And I want to say a few words to the man I see as Vanessa's true father." I looked up. For a moment I was dazed, as if I had misheard. But no. He turned and took the hand of Whitman, a Sterling family financial advisor with silver hair slicked back and a spotless white collar. "Uncle Whitman," Christopher went on, "thank you for guiding us, for teaching us what grit and class mean. Vanessa often says you are the model of the man she always wished for in her life. Today we officially have you as a spiritual father." Applause rolled like waves through the hall. Cameras panned to the head table and caught Vanessa's radiant smile as she leaned lightly on Whitman's shoulder. And I sat silent at table 14. Not a single lens turned my way, not a single word for the 30 years I raised her. My heart tightened, my fingers trembling as I set down the water glass. People ask what pain makes a man break. For me, it was not losing multi-million-dollar contracts in the past, but Laura's failed surgeries as cancer tore our family apart. The real pain was seeing my daughter, the child I once carried, the one I taught to ride a bike in our Austin yard, stand before 100 guests and call another man father. The people at my table began to whisper. A blonde woman murmured, "Poor thing, he must have nothing left." The man beside her nodded. He couldn't keep his career. Now the girl needs a different dad. I bit my lip to keep the tears in. Memories flooded back. Laura on her sickbed, my hand gripping hers, promising to protect our daughter at any cost. The day I quietly signed the largest defense contract of my life, a top-secret naval radar project, and knew that from then on all my assets had to be locked down, hidden even from family. I chose silence for 8 years, letting my daughter believe her father was a has-been, so she would learn humility and grit. I was wrong. My silence became a vacancy others filled. Now, in Vanessa's eyes, Whitman was father. I lifted the water and took a slow sip, cold in my throat, burning in my chest. I set the glass down carefully, as if one hard move would shatter the world. In that moment, I did not know my silence was lighting a fuse. A storm was coming that, when it broke, would show everyone here, not only Vanessa and the Sterlings, but every guest, that the man trapped at table 14 was neither poor nor useless. He carried a weapon more fearsome than any gun or contract. The truth. The applause still rang in my ears, but my mind drifted back 8 years. To the day Laura laid her thin hand over mine and whispered, "Robert, don't let our daughter lose her way." Laura was the lifeblood of our home. She taught elementary school for nearly 30 years. Her pay barely enough to buy new books for her students. She never cared for mansions, luxury cars, or European trips. Happiness to her was evenings at the old wooden table, helping our daughter with homework, listening to the radio with me when the Houston Astros played. When she found the lump, everything changed. The doctor said, "Stage 2. Treat immediately." I remember her eyes, afraid but resolute. "I don't fear pain. I fear leaving you and our daughter alone." I held her hand and said, "I won't let that happen." From that moment, I fought the disease the way I ran big projects for the Department of Defense. I sold the Colorado mountain vacation home, our family's summer haven, to pay for the first surgery. I drained my retirement to fund immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins. Every medical bill was as long as a defense contract, 6 figures slashing at the belief that love could outfight death. Vanessa was in her early 20s then, eyes red whenever she saw her mother grit through chemo. She saw me sign check after check, saw our warm Austin house grow emptier, saw me drive an old pickup instead of a luxury sedan. She believed her father had squeezed out every last dollar to save her mother, and I let her believe it, because the truth was far more complex. 3 months after Laura's diagnosis, I got a call from the Pentagon. Hale Dynamics, the company I built from nothing, had just won the largest contract in the history of naval radar, a stealth sensor system to track submarines at record depths. The value, nearly $50 million over 5 years. The condition, total secrecy, including finances. That meant I could not reveal this enormous fortune to anyone, not even family. The Department of Defense had the right to control all income reports, and any leak was deemed a breach of national security. I remember that night as I sat in my small office, the desk lamp shining on thick contracts bearing the Department of Defense logo. I sighed and looked out the window, Laura still in the hospital, Vanessa asleep on a hallway chair. I knew that if Laura recovered, I would tell her everything. But if she passed, perhaps silence was the only way to protect our daughter from prying eyes. Laura did not survive. After 2 years of fighting, she left us on a cold December morning. Before she went, she told me one last time, "Do not let our girl think money is everything. Let her learn the value of character." I nodded while my heart twisted. I understood. Do not spoil her. Do not let wealth eclipse integrity. Less than a month after the funeral, I received an envelope from Sterling Capital. Inside was a draft merger agreement, with my name already typed on the last page as if they were sure I would sign. I read every clause. If I signed, Hale Dynamics would become a unit under Sterling control. I folded it and sent it back with a single line. Not signed. Not now. Not ever. In that moment, I understood my silence would not be enough. Sooner or later, they would try to force a public declaration and pin me under opinion. From then on, I lived like a worn-out middle-class man. I moved to a small apartment in Austin, drove a 2010 Toyota Camry, shopped at Target, and ate dinner at a familiar diner. I let Vanessa believe her father had nothing left but memories of her mother. Yet each month, I quietly paid parts of her student loans, sent anonymous cashier's checks so her credit would not be ruined, helped with deposits when she rented a new place. Over 8 years, the total reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. She never asked where the money came from, perhaps thinking luck smiled or a bank miscalculated. I let it be, believing the misconception would make her stronger, teach her to stand on her own feet, but I underestimated the arrogance growing in her. While I lived in hiding, Vanessa entered the world of tailored suits, $1,000 wine, and clans like the Sterlings, people who speak of class as if it can be bought with a black card. I sit at table 14 tonight, remembering Laura's counsel. Ayahata have kept silent for 8 years, endured pitying looks, whispers, even distance from my own child. But when I saw her publicly erase me just to flatter a different father, I knew my promise to Laura had to be kept another way. The crystal chandelier over the ballroom cast a pale gold light that flooded the hall with slick luxury. Glass clinked, and laughter from Armani-suited businessmen and diamond-laden ladies rose and fell. For a father, it should have been pure joy. For me, it felt like a silent courtroom, where each glance and whisper was another indictment. From table 14, I could see every Sterling smile. They sat at the center as if the party orbited them. Whitman's silver hair, neatly slicked, patted Christopher's shoulder with pride. Vanessa sat between them, hand on a champagne flute, smiling brightly, the lights reflecting in her eyes with a strange shine that no longer belonged to my family. "Does he really have nothing left?" I heard a low male voice at the next table. "Yes, they say he sold the house, and the company is hardly his. At least the girl found the right harbor," a blonde woman answered, half pity and half scorn. I lowered my head and gripped the tablecloth, my palms damp. Each, nothing left, stabbing into my chest. A young guest, likely a friend of Christopher's, passed my table, paused with a smirk, and told his buddy, "Model father-in-law, seat by the kitchen, water glass, men's warehouse suit. Perfect." They laughed and moved on. I drew a deep breath and remembered a winter morning in Austin when Vanessa was 6. She hugged my leg and begged, "Daddy, don't go on a business trip. Stay with me and Mom." I promised I would return soon with radar schematics I believed would change the defense industry. I thought working like mad was for her future, yet now she treated that work like dust. The jazz band began, "Fly Me to the Moon." Couples flowed onto the floor, gowns flaring and fitted suits gliding beneath dim lights. I stayed seated, the chair cold as if it meant to swallow me. A server leaned in. "Would you like more champagne, sir? The Sterlings have paid for everything." I shook my head. I did not want their sweet pretense. I needed clarity, because I knew this night would not end as they thought. Yet in that moment, amid crisp laughter and casual cruelty, I was a shadow at my own daughter's wedding. No one came to table 14 to speak to me. No one said my name in toasts. And when the MC called the bride's family for photos, I was forgotten, noticing only when the flash went off without me in the frame. An older man at the next table, likely a banking partner, glanced at me and whispered to his wife, "Pitiful, isn't it? New money burns out fast. At least the girl chose the right family." I turned away. I did not want my reddened eyes seen, but deep inside, I swore they would not whisper like that again. I touched my jacket pocket. Inside were the old iPhone and the notarized deed I had prepared carefully, clipped to a copy of the merger agreement the Sterlings had tried to force me to sign right after Laura's funeral. I carried them tonight, not from paranoia, but because I knew that if they dared to announce a merger publicly, my silence would become consent, and Hale Dynamics would truly fall into their hands. I could feel its weight, not in grams, but in years of silence, and in the last promise I made to Laura. I took another sip of water, letting the cold, bland taste spread in my mouth as a reminder to myself, not yet. To bring down an opponent, sometimes you must let them believe they have already won, and at this moment, both Vanessa and the Sterling family were certain I was only a poor old man, waiting for the party to end so I could quietly disappear. I sat silently at table 14, trying to keep a calm demeanor while a rip current churned inside me, the warm glow of the crystal chandeliers making the white tablecloth seem to shine. I set my hand on my suit pocket, the place that held the old iPhone and the sealed file, and my hand trembled, not from fear, but from knowing I carried what could turn this entire party into a public trial. Mr. Hale, I looked up. Standing beside the table was Marissa Cole, my attorney, and in a simple navy dress she did not blend into the guests' glitter, yet that simplicity carried another power, her eyes calm and sharp, the eyes of someone used to seeing through luxurious veneers to find the truth. "Are you all right?" Marissa asked, resting a hand lightly on my chair. I forced a smile. "All right. At least I think I have enough patience to sit through the reception." Marissa bent closer, voice low enough for only me. "You don't need patience anymore. I brought a notarized copy of the will. Everything lawful, signed last week. They can't deny it." At that, I felt a warm current spread in my chest. The truth had a firm foothold now, not only in my hands, but in the legal system. I nodded slightly and took from my pocket the old silver iPhone, its screen scratched and its home button worn after years. But I knew what lived in its memory. The voice memo Laura left was the real weapon. I powered it on, the Apple logo appearing, a cool light in my eyes. Marissa glanced. "You've backed it up to the company server, right?" "Of course," I said. Not only to Hale Dynamics server, but also 2 copies in the cloud, and 1 at the bank. This device is only a keepsake, but tonight I want to use it itself. Marissa smiled. "You're doing the right thing." They'll find it hard to deny when her voice rings in this hall. I drew a deep breath, the guest's luxury perfume mixing with wine and the orchids on the tables. Yet to me, it smelled like steel in the old radar shop, tense, stifling, ready for battle. I straightened the file on my lap. The deed to the lakeside villa in Austin, valued at $6.5 million. The Hale Dynamics stock option papers worth tens of millions, and on top the new will Marissa had mentioned. All of it tucked neatly into a brown leather folder, like any ordinary packet of documents, though I knew that once opened each page would detonate like artillery. Marissa touched my shoulder lightly. "Only when you are ready. I'll be right here." I looked at her with a moment of gratitude, amid a room crowded with counterfeit smiles. She was the only one who did not look at me as a failure, and sometimes a single look of trust is enough to pull a man back from the brink. I closed my hand around the iPhone, the icy feel of old metal against my skin, and I thought of Laura, her gentle smile, soft voice, and her final instruction, "Robert, don't let our girl lose her way." Perhaps I was wrong to let silence stretch for 8 years, but tonight I would not be wrong. As the jazz echoed, I took another sip of water to keep that cold clarity, the hall still spinning with dances and toasts, and no one suspected that at table 14 a storm was ready to break. When the jazz ended, the MC invited the groom to speak, every light swinging to the head table, and I shifted slightly in my chair, forcing myself calm. Christopher Sterling stood, his black tuxedo perfectly cut, the studs flashing under the lights, microphone in hand, and a voice that carried with the confidence of someone used to pitching before investment committees. "Ladies and gentlemen, today is not only the day Vanessa and I marry, but the day our 2 families unite, both in affection and in business." A buzz of curiosity swept the room. Christopher glanced around, his eyes pausing on me for a heartbeat, before sliding away as if I were a nameless spectator. Many of you have heard that Hale Dynamics, founded by my father-in-law, once had a role in defense. But times change. Now, under Sterling Capital's leadership, Hale Dynamics will become a new branch within our ecosystem. Applause rose, mostly from the Sterling's banker friends and partners. I was stunned. A new branch? He had casually erased my life's work, folding it beneath the Sterling name. Vanessa sat beside him, nodding and smiling as if in full agreement, even resting her head on her husband's shoulder, pride in her eyes as if to say she had escaped the shabby shadow of her father. A man at the table near me bent to his wife. "See? I told you. His company is mostly named now. Best to hand it to the Sterlings." The wife giggled and tapped her spoon to the glass in approval. My face burned. Years of radar research, classified contracts, and long nights in naval labs collapsed into one sentence: a branch of Sterling Capital. I glanced right. Marissa sat steady, eyes cool, and when our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod. Be patient. Not yet. Christopher went on. We are proud to bring Hale Dynamics into the family fund. This will be a turning point, a rebirth, and more importantly, it proves Vanessa chose not only the right partner, but the right family, with vision. Guests clapped noisily, and a few looked at me with mingled pity and mockery. I sat straight, hands on my knees, refusing to react. Not at this moment. Everything I carried, the voice memo from Laura, the villa deed, the new will, waited for the perfect moment, but inside the fire had flared. Christopher thought he had humiliated me once more, thought I would sit still and swallow it, not knowing each clap only fed the moment I would erupt. I lifted the water glass slowly and took a small sip to steady my voice, Laura's words echoing in my head. Robert, let our daughter learn the value of character, and I nodded faintly as if answering my late wife, exhaling slowly. Tonight they wanted to make Hale Dynamics subordinate. Fine. But when the truth came out, both Sterling Capital and Vanessa would understand some things cannot be bought with power or money. The light still bathed the head table as Christopher raised his glass to conclude, Please raise a glass to the glorious future of Sterling and of Hale Dynamics under its new roof. Crystal glasses chimed and the whole hall rejoiced. The banquet room fell quiet, with only the soft background music. I walked up to the stage, my hand gripping Laura's old iPhone. 180 gazes followed, half eager to see what other farce might come from the poor old man, half shocked by my sudden move. Vanessa pressed her lips, her fingers trembling on the wine glass, her eyes pleading and angry. I set the phone down and looked around, my voice hoarse but firm. You just heard my daughter say my wife died in shame, that she married the wrong man, a failure. That is the greatest insult to a woman who spent her life teaching children what decency is. Whitman arched a brow. Christopher smirked. Both believed I was only thrashing in vain. I drew a deep breath, eyes fixed on Vanessa. You forgot what your mother asked before she left, and now I have to remind you. Not with my words, but with your mother's own voice. I had kept silent for 8 years, enduring pitying looks and whispers, but tonight, when my wife's honor and my legacy were made into a joke, I could not be silent any longer. This was not only to protect myself, but the last lesson I had to give my daughter, that no one has the right to build a future on deceit and contempt. I pressed play. Sound poured through the speakers. Laura's voice, weak but clear. Robert, if you are hearing this, it means I'm gone. I have to say something. I worry about our girl. She is becoming cruel. Last week, when the nurse helped me into the bathroom, she asked when I would die so you could be free. I heard every word. She is ashamed of you, ashamed of this family. I am afraid she will trade love for vanity. The hall went dead still. A sob slipped out from somewhere. Vanessa's face went ashen, her lips trembling as if to object, but no words came. I continued, Laura's voice still echoing. Promise me, Robert, do not let money blind her. If one day she uses my death as a pretext to humiliate you, then you must show her the truth. That will be the only lesson that can save her. The recording stopped. The room was so silent I could hear a spoon hit a porcelain plate. I lifted my head, looking straight at Vanessa. That is your mother's last wish, and tonight you have forced me to carry it out. The echo of the audio still hung in the air like a chill. After a moment, murmurs rose, little waves lapping the shore. Some covered their mouths. Some stared at Vanessa in disbelief. Some raised phones and pointed cameras at the stage, recording every word. Screens lit the dim as curiosity mixed with confusion. The air in the hall suddenly sagged, like a curtain torn away to reveal what no one wanted to see. Vanessa sprang up before I could speak again, her nails white. rushing the stage, her voice choked. "That's fake! Dad, you can't do this. Someone edited the file, spliced the voice, staged this. This is a dirty plot to ruin our wedding." She tried to hold back tears, but her tone sharpened like a blade at me. Christopher followed, stepping to her side and raising his voice. "Someone is trying to turn this day into a cheap show. Who brings that trash here? We can check metadata, forensics, if you have anything, give it to an expert, but don't turn this wedding into a stage for hateful flyers." A few guests clapped lightly, backing Christopher's stance. Whitman growled as if emboldened. "It would be a shame if anyone exploited memories to sow division. Let us stay calm." The room split in two. The Sterling's crowd, banker friends, club colleagues, looked satisfied, as if people still stood with them. Others, more ordinary guests, seemed to tilt toward me, yet hesitated. A middle-aged woman whispered, "Sounds like a trap set in advance." A younger man said to his neighbor, "If that's real, it's cruel." Marissa Cole rose and stepped to the mic, her gait cool and professional. She spoke clear and strong enough to cut the buzz. "I am counsel for Mr. Hale. I understand an instant reaction at a wedding, and I fully support everyone's right to doubt. That is precisely why we prepared. The audio exists in multiple copies, including on the company server and a notarized backup sent to a custodian bank. We are ready for a forensic verification right now, if anyone wishes." The room fell into another silence. Not shocked now, but weighing. Marissa did not shout or inflame. Her calm created a back-force that made Vanessa's denial look thin, yet doubt still hovered. Vanessa turned to the crowd, eyes blazing red. "They are only doing this to hide the truth. My father lives in delusion. He is just a man who likes to pander. Please understand us." She tried to solicit pity with tears, and many, swept by crowd emotion and the bride's shame, faced the Sterlings. A blogger in the corner, phone glowing, whispered, "This will trend. Righteous wedding drama tonight." And more phones started live streams. Images of Vanessa crying, of me standing steady at the mic. Everything turned instantly consumable. Within minutes, the story began spilling outside through quick clips. I felt it. Not only private shame, but how instant spread would turn a label into social template. If Vanessa and Christopher stamped fake on it before anyone checked, public opinion could pivot. They had the advantage of first tellers. The one who speaks first often wins at the media center. Marissa glanced at me, then turned back, her voice smooth but edged. "We will not react emotionally, but I repeat, everything is backed up and verifiable. If the other side wants a forensics expert up here now, I am ready. If they do not wish to argue further at this moment, we can pause and await independent expert results. But we should not rush to conclusions." Whitman cut in, face hard. "Why wait? They are attacking our family's honor in the middle of this event. We will not accept defamation." He lowered his tone, still loud enough for nods around him. "We protect the bride. If Mr. Hale has evidence, let him show it. If not, please respect tonight." His words tugged half the room toward him. A face-off drifted in the air. People who had once felt for the image of me selling a house no longer felt certain. Some filmed Vanessa's pallid face, then scrolled on. I stood still, my heart beating with a new coldness. Not hatred, but recognition. I had not planned to make a scene. I only wanted the truth. But when a powerful family uses this event to force a fake merger and turn my silence into consent, then silence becomes complicity. And complicity I cannot accept. In my jacket pocket, the merger agreement still lay there, the draft they sent after the funeral. For years I hid it because I did not want to wound Vanessa further. Now, if they claimed ownership with words, I had grounds to present evidence. But before that, I had to hold tempo. The crowd was wavering. The Sterlings were trying to seize the narrative. Marissa stepped close and whispered, "Stay calm. I'll bring in an expert to check the file's metadata right after this. And when every doubt is cleared, I'll ask the MC to give a few more minutes for me to present other evidence. A few looks from the other side began to shift from anger to curiosity, many still unsure whom to believe, and that very not knowing created a decisive moment. The banquet room was no longer whole. It had been slit down the middle, one half with the Sterlings, the other cautious, waiting for proof. The wedding night became a stage of wits, and at the edge of the stage I felt the cold wind of a larger turning point. If I wanted to win, I had to show them not only Laura's voice, but also proof of assets, contracts, and ownership. The murmurs had barely settled when the MC edged toward the mic to close the dispute, but Marissa raised her hand, voice steady. "Excuse me, but to prevent serious misunderstandings from spreading, Mr. Hale has a few more documents to clarify, and I recommend that when truth concerns ownership and honor, transparency on the spot is necessary." Chandelier light flashed on the file I drew from my pocket. I set it on the lectern, my hand gripping the paper's edge, my eyes fixed on Whitman Sterling. "You have just heard Laura's voice, and if that is not enough to prove the truth, I will show you something else, the thing the Sterling family has tried to hide for 8 years. I opened the file to reveal a page stamped with a red notary seal, the deed to real property on Westheimer, Houston, the office building everyone believed belonged to Sterling Capital. I lifted it high for all to see. "This is the deed for the building at number 1840 Westheimer, current value over $32 million. The lawful owner, Robert Hale. The tenant from 2015 to the present, at a nominal $1 per year, is Sterling Capital." A wave of murmurs rolled through, faces confused, a few derisive laughs. I looked straight at Whitman. "You know it well because you yourself signed the lease through the county brokerage office. My name was hidden under a trust shell. For national security reasons, every transaction had to be confidential. I kept silent to save your family's face. And you, for 8 years, have strutted about claiming it as ancestral property, that Sterling never lost its roots. But the truth is different. An empty barrel makes the loudest noise." Whitman Sterling blanched, lips working without words. Patricia covered her face, a sob breaking the heavy hush. Christopher gripped his glass until it shattered in his hand, shards tinkling to the floor, unnoticed. Vanessa screamed, "Dad, why are you doing this? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? This is my wedding day." I met her eyes, my voice low but iron. "No, Vanessa, this is the day you chose to bury your father's honor, to flatter a family that built a castle on sand. You turned your mother's words into a tool of humiliation, and you yourself forced me to speak the truth. No one in this room, including you, has the right to deny it." The hall stirred, chairs pivoting toward me. A young guest, clearly not in the Sterling's camp, clapped. Then another. The applause spread like a spark, catching in dry timber. Many did not necessarily support me, but the truth now glowed on their phone screens and could not be denied. Marissa murmured to me, "Do you still have the merger agreement?" I nodded. One more piece, and I knew when to lay it down. But at this moment the balance in the room had tilted. The Sterlings were no longer the family at the center. They were the eye of the storm under every gaze. I stepped from the lectern, leaving the deed on the mic stand. It was not merely a sheet of paper. It was proof of 8 years of silence, the sign that Undertow had broken. The scattered applause still ran through the room, but I knew I could not stop here. The Sterlings were used to papering things over, and if I did not take one more step, they would claw back by morning. Marissa gave a small nod, as if to say, "It's time." I returned to the lectern and drew from the file a thick sheaf clipped with bright steel. I lifted it high. "This is not only real estate paperwork. This is proof the Sterling family attempted to seize Hale Dynamics, the company I built with my bare hands." The room fell dead silent. I opened to the first page, bold letters reading, "Merger agreement under the Sterling Capital logo." The letterhead plush, the company seal bright red. This contract was sent to me only 4 weeks after Laura's funeral. You can see the blank where my signature would go, while Sterling's side is pre-signed. The contents: transfer all control of Hale Dynamics to Sterling Capital under the label of a voluntary merger. In return, I receive an annual stipend, $200,000, a pittance beside the tens of millions the company generates each year. I turned the page and read slowly. Section 7.1. After signing, Mr. Robert Hale shall withdraw from all managerial activities. Section 7.2. Mr. Robert Hale shall no longer have the right to speak publicly about the company's history. Section 8.4. All statements and publications related to Hale Dynamics must read a company of Sterling Capital. Angry murmurs burst forth. A few guests, engineers who had worked with me, exclaimed, "Good grief!" and they dared call that a mutually beneficial merger. Whitman lurched up, face crimson. "Enough! That is only an internal draft with no legal force. You cannot parade it here to slander us." I looked straight at him, my voice low and deliberate. "Whitman Sterling, you signed this while I was kneeling at my wife's grave. You saw me sell the house, strip assets, assumed I was spent and broke. You sought to exploit mourning to swallow Hale Dynamics for pennies, to turn it into a trinket in Sterling's portfolio. And for 8 years your family kept boasting of the bond between Hale and Sterling, when the truth is, I never signed." I held up the last page toward the hall. Under the chandeliers, the shaky signature of Whitman Sterling, Jr. showed clear. A ripple of O swept the room. Phones lifted, live streams spun up. Marissa stepped in, voice cold as steel. "We have verified this contract's authenticity through an independent notary. If anyone still doubts, you can check it tomorrow morning at the Harris County office. This document is lawful and admissible in court." Christopher lunged forward, shouting, "My father only signed provisionally. He did not understand the terms. This is a smear tactic." I answered without raising my voice, like a judge reading sentence. "No, Christopher. Your father understood perfectly. He signed because he thought I was cleaned out, and that a few lines would let him swallow my company whole. He miscalculated one thing. I would rather be thought poor by the world than sell my legacy cheap." The hall exploded. Jeers aimed at the Sterling table rang out. "How shameless!" "Exploiting the funeral." "Not a shred of decency left." Patricia burst into sobs, face buried in a napkin. Vanessa shook, her lips moving without words. Christopher slammed his wineglass to the floor, shards skittering, and no one cared. I folded the contract, set it neatly on the lectern, and looked around the room. You ask why I have to reveal this here tonight? Because only hours ago, Christopher Sterling declared that Hale Dynamics is part of Sterling Capital. If I said nothing, my silence would be taken as consent, and consenting to a lie is something I will never accept. Thunderous applause. Not scattered this time. Half the room rose. Heels struck the floor. Shouts of, "That's right," tangled with a storm of camera shutters. The tide had turned. The Sterlings were now only mannequins at the eye of the storm, stripped bare before the public. The room was still roaring when I tapped the mic for quiet. Fury was boiling, but I needed absolute silence for the final piece. I slowly drew the phone from my inner pocket, the screen glowing blue, turned it to the hall, and said in a level voice, "You have just seen proof the Sterlings tried to swallow my company for pennies. Now, to close, I will show you another truth, what the so-called penniless old man actually holds." I opened the banking app and enlarged the balances, digits blazing under the lights. Chase Bank, personal account, $33,412,000. Wells Fargo, investment portfolio, $41,860,000. Total, more than $75 million in liquid funds. The murmur cracked like thunder. A few guests clapped hands to mouse. Many raised phones to capture the screen. At the Sterling table, Christopher stood rooted, face flushed with rage and shame. Patricia, sobbed aloud. Vanessa stepped back, staring at me as if it could not be true. I went on, calm as if reading an annual report. You may ask why. If I am wealthy, I lived 8 years in a small apartment, drove an old Camry, ate at a diner. The answer is simple. I followed Laura's last wish. She wanted our daughter to learn the value of character, not of a credit card. I let the girl believe her father was poor so she would learn to stand on her own. And for 8 years, I quietly paid. $87,000 in student loans, $43,000 in credit card debt, $91,000 in rent and apartment. Deposits, $26,000 for the BMW X5 she drives every day. Total, $247,000. All of it anonymous transfers she never imagined came from her father. I lifted the phone and scrolled to an Excel sheet listing every line. And oh my God, burst from table number 6 and spread into a wave of whispers. Half the room shook their heads. The other half looked at Vanessa with a mix of pity and contempt. Vanessa sobbed, hands trembling. Dad, why did you hide this from me all this time? I cut in, a closing verdict in my voice. You thought your father was helpless, that your mother died in shame, that you needed a rich family to replace us. You used words to kill the memory of a decent woman. Tonight, I cannot allow that lie to live. Christopher stepped forward, growling, You're just smearing my wife and wrecking this wedding. Marissa answered, voice cold. You should be careful. Everything Mr. Hale presented tonight is preserved in video, audio, and notarized documents. If you dare call it fabricated, we are ready to meet at federal court. The hall erupted again. Cheers, a few guests stood and shouted, Bravo! The crowd's eyes no longer wavered. The scales had snapped. The sterlings were exposed. I looked at Vanessa one last time, eyes blurred, but voice steady. My daughter, I once tried to protect you with silence, but tonight you forced me to teach you another lesson. The truth cannot be buried under a wedding dress or drowned out by lavish music. It will always rise, and when it rises, it washes away every falsehood. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, her sobs drowning the half-played background tune. Christopher backed away, face pale, the swagger of the man who mocked me at table 14 gone. Whitman stood like a statue, glassy-eyed at the contract on the lectern. I closed the phone and slid it into my vest. Around me the applause stretched on, no longer hesitant. It sounded like a judge's gavel. This wedding had become a public hearing, and the verdict was plain. That night, I left the ballroom in a storm of flashing lights, not from the wedding photographer, but from dozens of phones live-streaming the moment the poor old man raised the scales and toppled a clan. Only hours later, sitting in my small Austin apartment, my screen blazed with alerts. Hashtags, Us Wedding Reckoning, Us Sterling Exposed. Robert Hale spread across Twitter and TikTok. A video of me holding up the account balances passed more than 2 million views overnight. Online headlines screamed, Bride smears biological father exposed in a lavish wedding, Sterling capital, the castle built on sand. From washed-up pauper to quiet millionaire, the Houston shock story. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, local TV went live outside Sterling headquarters. Reporters swarmed, microphones pointed at Christopher and Vanessa shuffling out, haggard. They would not answer, only kept their heads down as the crowd shouted, Is it true he really owns the building? Vanessa, do you have anything to say to the public? Whitman had vanished. The press reported he was hospitalized for a sudden hypertensive episode, but the public was unforgiving. Photos of his signature on the merger agreement circulated, with notary corroboration. Sterling Capital's credibility plunged within days. Its share price swung hard, and shareholders hammered them with questions. Patricia Sterling, once a fixture in charity clubs, became a punchline. Photos of her weeping at the wedding spawned a swarm of memes. When you find out the castle isn't yours. As for Vanessa, she called me on the second night after the wedding, voice raw. Dad, Christopher Sterling wants to annul the marriage. He says I deceived him and hid the truth about my family. His friends won't let go of that scene. I've lost everything." I was silent a long moment, then said only, "No, Vanessa, you have not lost everything. You still have a chance to rebuild, but only if you learn to value the truth." I heard her sobs, and this time there was no anger or defiance, only bare despair. Marissa came by the next morning with a stack of printouts. She set them down and said evenly, "You know, the truth has traveled farther than we planned. I thought the Sterlings would hit back, but right now they're busy with shareholders, the press, and the regulators." I looked out the window. Texas light laid bright gold across the world, as if sweeping away the shadow of 8 years. But inside me there was no gloating, only a hollow that words could not fill. I had kept my promise to Laura and guarded her honor, and the price was my daughter, now facing total collapse. That night, curled up on the old sofa, I opened Laura's iPhone again. The recording was still there, her weak voice whispering from the past. I played only a few seconds, then stopped, not because I couldn't bear it, but because I had done exactly what she wanted. The media called it the wedding trial, the courtroom at a wedding, but to me it wasn't a trial for the Sterlings. It was for my own family, and the verdict, I knew, would haunt Vanessa for many years to come. 6 months have passed since that chaotic wedding night. My life slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Morning coffee, afternoon walks around the lake by my apartment, evenings in my study reading financial reports. But the world outside was no longer ordinary. Sterling Capital did not collapse overnight, but its credibility was gone. The press and shareholders questioned hidden debts and inflated assets. Regulators began scrutinizing every bidding file. Defense projects they once won easily were now shelved or went to rivals. Whitman had to step back from management and hand things to a deputy. Christopher tried to salvage the image but failed, and Patricia disappeared from charity circles to avoid the glare. An empire once swaggering now staggered, unsteady in every tender it entered. As for me, together with Marissa and an advisory team, we established the Laura Hale Memorial Foundation. All my investment principal remains intact, but the net annual returns, about a few $1,000,000, will be allocated to keep it running, funding breast cancer research, helping patients who can't afford treatment, and awarding scholarships to medical students. Each year, about a few $1,000,000 will be allocated. I want the capital to grow, the returns to multiply, and then turn into a long current, just as Laura wanted to plant hope for generations. On the day the first research center opened, I stood at the podium and looked at the bronze plate with my wife's name. A breeze moved through the white courtyard, carrying the scent of jasmine she loved. I whispered, "Laura, I kept my word." One late evening there was a knock. I opened the door. Vanessa stood there. No wedding dress, no glitter of parties. Only a 30-year-old woman with a gaunt face, tangled hair, and red eyes. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I'm sorry. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, Christopher Sterling, everything. I have nowhere else to go." I invited her in and set a glass of water before her. She told me about friends drifting away, the company firing her to avoid scandal, sleepless nights filled with nightmares. I listened without judgment, without interrupting. When she finished, I said only, "Vanessa, I never stopped loving you, but love does not mean indulgence. I let you learn this lesson at the highest price. If you want to start again, you must stand up on your own, with honesty and character, not with your father's money." She burst into tears and rested her head on my shoulder, like when she was a child. But I knew this was not a return, only the first step of a long road she had to walk herself. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the living room. Laura's old iPhone lay on the table, its screen casting a gentle glow. I played another recording, the bright peal of her laughter when Vanessa, at 8 years old, mispronounced satellite. I laughed along, tears welling. They say justice delayed is still justice. But to me, justice is not only truth laid bare. Justice is keeping a promise to the departed and drawing a clear boundary with the living. I looked up at Laura's framed photo on the wall and nodded, then turned off the lights and let the Texas night blanket the small apartment. No more anger, no more hatred, only a man who had fulfilled his last promise. If you have ever felt belittled by your own kin, would you choose to suffer in silence or stand up and reclaim your honor? Leave a comment below. I truly want to know, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because there are many more stories I will tell. Stories proving that sometimes justice is found right at the family dinner table.